Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring something really pretty amazing, histamine receptors. We've got this article from Assay Genie.
Okay.
It's histamine receptors, gatekeepers of immunological and neurological responses. And it's full of surprises. You probably know that histamine is involved in allergies, right?
Right.
But get this, it also affects digestion, sleep, even how our brains work.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, histamine is a bit of a multitasker. It plays a much bigger role in our bodies than I think a lot of people realize.
So let's unpack this. The article starts by saying that histamine receptors are like doorways on our cells.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, think of it this way. Every cell in your body is like a house
Okay.
with many doors. And histamine is like a key
Okay.
that fits into certain doors, these histamine receptors. When histamine unlocks a door, it triggers specific actions inside the cell, kind of like flipping a switch.
Okay, so different receptors mean different actions.
Right.
That makes sense. And these receptors are part of a larger family. It's
Yeah.
called G protein-coupled receptors, or GPCRs.
Yes, and that's an important point. GPCRs are like a huge network of communication pathways in our bodies. They help our cells sense and respond to everything from hormones to light, even smells and tastes. Knowing that histamine receptors are part of this family gives us a clue about just how widespread their impact can be.
So it's like a massive communication system with histamine receptors playing a key role.
Exactly.
And there are actually 4 different types of these histamine receptors,
Right.
each with its own specialty. The article calls H1 the allergy troublemaker.
Right. H1 receptors are found in places like your skin, airways, and blood vessels. When histamine binds to these receptors, it triggers the release of chemicals that cause those familiar allergy symptoms, the sneezing, the itchy eyes, the runny nose, the whole 9 yards.
So that explains why antihistamines work for allergies. They're blocking those H1 receptors.
Yeah. Exactly. They basically jam the lock on those doorways, so histamine can't get in and trigger the allergic reaction. But here's where it gets interesting. H1 receptors are also found in the central nervous system, which means they're involved in things like our sleep-wake cycles and even how we think.
Hold on. So the same receptor that causes a runny nose also affects our sleep
Yes,
and brain function. That's wild.
it is. Think about how you feel during an allergic reaction. You might feel drowsy or have trouble concentrating. That's partly due to histamine affecting those H1 receptors in your brain.
Okay, so H1 is clearly a busy receptor. What about the next type, H2?
Mhm.
The article highlights its role in the stomach.
H2 receptors are crucial for digestion. They control the release of stomach acid, which is what breaks down the food we eat.
Okay.
Imagine you're eating a delicious cheeseburger.
Okay.
When that burger hits your stomach, histamine is released and binds to H2 receptors, telling your stomach to pump out acid to digest it. Without those H2 receptors, digestion would be a lot less efficient.
So H2 helps us break down that cheeseburger. I'm starting to see why these receptors are so important. But the article mentions H2 being in the heart and blood vessels too.
Right.
So it's not just a stomach thing.
You're right. H2 receptors are found in other parts of the body. And while we don't fully understand all their roles yet, we do know they can affect things like blood flow and heart rate. Scientists are still exploring how we might be able to target these receptors to treat cardiovascular conditions.
This is getting complex. So we've got H1 involved in allergies, sleep, and brain function, and H2 helping us digest food and potentially affecting our heart and blood vessels. What about the next type, H3? The article makes it sound like this one is the brainy one of the bunch.
Yeah, H3 receptors are primarily found in the brain, and they play a crucial role in regulating the release of neurotransmitters.
Okay,
These are chemicals that act as messengers between brain cells.
got it.
And they control everything from our mood and sleep to our ability to learn and remember.
So H3 receptors are like the control center for our brain chemicals.
In a way, yes. Think of your brain as a complex orchestra, and neurotransmitters are the different instruments. H3 receptors act like the conductor, ensuring that each instrument plays at the right time and volume to create a harmonious symphony of brain activity.
Okay, that's a great analogy. So if those H3 receptors aren't working properly, it's like the orchestra is out of tune.
Exactly. Imbalances in neurotransmitters are linked to various mental health conditions, like depression, anxiety, and even schizophrenia.
Understanding how H3 receptors work could lead to new treatments for these disorders.
Wow, so by targeting these receptors, we could potentially help people with mental health conditions. That's amazing. Okay, on to the last type, the H4 receptors. The article describes them as the new kids on the block.
Yeah, H4 receptors were discovered more recently than the others, and we're still learning about all their functions. They're primarily found in cells involved in our immune system, like white blood cells,
Okay.
and they play a role in inflammation.
So H4 is the immune system specialist.
Mm-hmm.
But what does inflammation have to do with it? Inflammation is a natural process that helps our bodies heal and fight off infection. Imagine you cut your finger. The area around the cut becomes red and swollen, right? That's inflammation at work, bringing white blood cells to the site of injury to fight off bacteria and help the tissue repair itself.
Okay, I get it. So inflammation is our body's way of protecting itself.
Exactly. But sometimes inflammation can go awry and become chronic, leading to conditions like arthritis, asthma, or even inflammatory bowel disease. We're starting to understand that H4 receptors play a role in regulating this inflammatory process.
So if we can figure out how to control those H4 receptors, we could potentially develop new treatments for all sorts of inflammatory diseases.
That's the hope. It's a very active area of research, and there's a lot of excitement about the potential for H4 targeted therapies.
This is all incredibly fascinating. We've got these 4 types of receptors, all triggered by the same chemical, histamine, but each playing such a diverse role in our bodies. It's like a finely tuned orchestra,
It is.
with each receptor playing its part to keep us functioning properly.
That's a great way to put it. And the more we understand about this intricate system, the better equipped we are to develop targeted therapies for a wide range of conditions.
Speaking of which, let's talk about why all of this matters.
Okay.
Why should you, our listener, care about these tiny receptors?
Because understanding these receptors could be the key to unlocking a whole new arsenal of treatments for everything from allergies and digestive disorders to mental health conditions and inflammatory diseases.
That's incredible. So we're not just talking about relieving allergist symptoms. We're talking about potentially treating some of the most common and debilitating conditions affecting people today.
Exactly, and the potential goes even beyond that. As we delve deeper into the intricate workings of these receptors, who knows what other applications we might discover.
This deep dive into histamine receptors is already blowing my mind. We've learned that histamine isn't just about allergies. It's a powerful player in our immune system, brain function, digestion, and so much more. And these 4 types of receptors are the key to understanding its complex effects on our bodies.
And we've only just scratched the surface. Stay tuned as we explore how scientists are targeting these receptors to develop new and innovative treatments for a wide range of conditions.
I can't wait to learn more. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a quick recap of what we've learned so far about these fascinating histamine receptors. Then we'll dive into some of the specific ways they're being targeted for new therapies. Don't go anywhere.
So, all right, let's recap what we've learned so far. We've got these 4 key players, the histamine receptors, H1 through H4. And even though they're triggered by the same molecule, histamine,
Right?
each one has a very specific role to play. It's like they each have their own specialized job in the body.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing how much variety there is in their functions.
Yeah.
We started with H1, the one we usually associate with those pesky allergy symptoms.
Right.
But as we learned, it's not just about sniffles and sneezes.
Yeah.
H1 also plays a role in our sleep-wake cycles.
Right.
And even affects our brain function.
Exactly. And then there's H2, which is essential for digestion because it regulates the production of stomach acid.
Right.
But we also find it in the heart and blood vessels,
Yeah, okay.
suggesting it might have a broader role in cardiovascular health as well.
And then we moved on to H3, which is primarily located in the brain.
Right.
If H2 helps us break down a cheeseburger, H3 is like the conductor of our brain's orchestra,
Yeah.
making sure all those neurotransmitters are in sync.
That's a great way to think about it. And because H3 receptors have such a powerful influence on our brain chemistry,
Yeah.
they're a prime target for developing new treatments for mental health conditions.
It's fascinating how something as tiny as a receptor can have such a huge impact on our well-being.
I know.
And then there's H4, the newest member of the histamine receptor family.
Right?
We know it's involved in immune responses and inflammation,
Yep.
but scientists are still uncovering all its secrets.
H4 is like the new frontier of histamine receptor research.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of excitement about its potential for treating inflammatory diseases.
Okay, so we've got this incredible system of histamine receptors,
Right.
each with its own specialized function.
Yeah.
But how are scientists actually using this knowledge
Right.
to develop new treatments? The article mentioned antihistamines as a classic example.
Right. Antihistamines are a great example of how we can target specific histamine receptors
Okay.
to achieve a desired effect.
Okay.
By blocking the H1 receptor, we can effectively reduce those annoying allergy symptoms.
So antihistamines are like those little doorstops that prevent histamine from binding to the H1 receptor
Uh-huh.
and triggering the allergic cascade.
That's a great analogy. And what's even more exciting is that researchers are now developing more targeted antihistamines that can block specific subtypes of the H1 receptor,
Oh, wow.
reducing the chances of side effects.
So it's not just about blocking all H1 receptors, it's
Yeah.
about being more precise in our approach.
Yeah, exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where we can achieve the desired therapeutic benefit without causing unwanted side effects.
That makes a lot of sense. So are we seeing this targeted approach being used with other histamine receptors as well?
Absolutely. For instance, medications that target H2 receptors, often called H2 blockers, are commonly used to treat conditions like heartburn and ulcers. By blocking H2 receptors in the stomach, these medications reduce the production of stomach acid, providing relief from those uncomfortable symptoms.
So in that case, we're not necessarily stopping histamine itself,
Right.
but rather blocking its effect
Yeah.
on those specific H2 receptors.
That's right. We're essentially cutting off communication between histamine and the H2 receptor,
Right.
preventing the signal that would normally lead to increased stomach acid production.
Okay, so we've got targeted therapies for H1 and H2 receptors. What about H3, the brain receptor? Are there any treatments in development that focus on H3?
Definitely. Because H3 receptors regulate those crucial neurotransmitters in the brain. They hold immense potential for treating a variety of mental health conditions. Researchers are exploring ways to either block or activate these receptors, depending on the desired outcome.
So by fine-tuning the activity of those H3 receptors, we could potentially help people with depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, and even cognitive decline.
Exactly. It's a rapidly evolving field, and the research is incredibly promising.
This is just incredible. It's amazing to think that these tiny receptors,
I know.
once solely associated with allergies,
Right.
are now at the forefront of research for conditions affecting so many different aspects of our health.
It really highlights the power of scientific discovery
Yeah.
and how something as seemingly simple as a receptor can open doors to a whole new world of therapeutic possibilities.
Speaking of new frontiers, what's the latest on research into H4 receptors?
H4 is still the new kid on the block, but researchers are making significant progress in understanding its role in immune responses and inflammation. Early studies suggest that H4 receptors might be involved in a wide range of inflammatory diseases, from skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis
Wow.
to more systemic conditions like rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease.
So targeting H4 could potentially lead to new treatments for
That's
all those
absolutely.
conditions.
Researchers are currently investigating a variety of approaches,
Okay.
including developing drugs that can block the H4 receptor and dampen the inflammatory response.
Wow. It's incredible to think about the potential impact this research could have on people's lives. Imagine being able to effectively treat chronic inflammatory diseases
Right.
that currently have limited treatment options.
It's truly an exciting time to be following this field of research.
It is, and this deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexity and importance of these histamine receptors. It's clear that they're much more than just allergy triggers. They're involved in so many crucial aspects of our health.
Absolutely. And as researchers continue to unravel their secrets, we're likely to discover even more about their diverse roles in our bodies and their potential as therapeutic targets.
This has been such a fascinating exploration, and I'm already eager to hear what else you have to share about the latest developments in histamine receptor research.
Okay.
But before we dive into that, I think it would be helpful to take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far and consider the broader implications of this knowledge.
What strikes me is how interconnected everything is. We've talked about histamine's role in allergies, digestion, brain function, and the immune system.
Right.
It really highlights that our bodies don't work in isolation. It's all one big intricate system.
It's like a domino effect, right? One tiny molecule can trigger a chain reaction across multiple systems. And what's exciting is that we're starting to understand these connections at a deeper level,
Right.
which opens up a whole new world of treatment possibilities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Instead of just masking symptoms, we can now start thinking about targeting the specific receptors that are driving those symptoms.
Right.
It's like having a personalized toolkit for each individual's health needs.
And speaking of personalized medicine, the article focused mainly on the medical applications of histamine receptor research.
Right.
But I can't help but wonder if there are other potential applications. Could we target these receptors to improve things like cognitive function or sleep quality, even in people who aren't necessarily sick?
That's a fascinating question, and one that researchers are starting to explore.
Hmm,
We already know that H1 receptors play a role in regulating sleep-wake cycles,
right.
and H3 receptors are involved in things like learning and memory. Imagine the possibilities if we could fine-tune the activity of those receptors to enhance cognitive performance or improve sleep quality.
It's almost like science fiction.
I know.
But it's rooted in real science. It makes you wonder what other potential applications we haven't even thought of yet.
It's truly exciting to think about, and it underscores the importance of continued research in this field. There's still so much we don't know about histamine receptors and their full potential.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given me a whole new perspective on histamine.
Yeah.
I used to think it was just the enemy, the cause of my seasonal allergies, but now I see it as this complex,
Yeah.
fascinating molecule that plays a vital role in so many aspects of our health.
And the more we learn about it, the more we realize how much potential it holds for treating diseases and even enhancing human well-being.
So, to our listener, the next time you reach for that antihistamine, remember that you're not just fighting a stuffy nose, you're interacting with a complex and powerful system that's essential for life itself. Keep that curiosity alive, and always remember there's always more to learn.